Hello everyone, today I will continue telling you the story of the single mother Hoai. I hope you enjoy watching the video. The news of Tusan's pregnancy reached Hoai through an unexpected phone call late in the afternoon. Tusan's voice on the other end of the line was both nervous and happy, speaking slowly, as if afraid her emotions might overflow. Hoai froze for a few seconds as she listened, then laughed instinctively, a very real joy rising in her heart. "So San is going to be a mother," she whispered, happy and deeply moved. Hoai hadn't had the chance to visit Hung's younger sister yet, but in her mind, countless images had already appeared. She imagined Tusan being gently supported by Hoai at every step, being cared for and loved by Hoai's mother as if she were her own daughter. Thinking of that, Hoai felt reassured for Tusan. She was glad that her sister wouldn't have to walk the most important journey of her life alone, glad that at last Tusan had a home filled with love to lean on. That happiness was real, but deep inside Hoai, a very faint feeling brushed past her heart, not jealousy, but longing. She, too, wished that one day she could be accepted with such complete warmth. With Hung's mother, the relationship between them still held a distance that was hard to define. It wasn't tense, nor was it distant, just not close enough for Hoai to truly open her heart, not familiar enough for her to see it as a place of emotional refuge. That evening, when Hung came home, Hoai told him about the phone call with Tusan. Her eyes lit up as she spoke about his sister's happiness, but her voice softened during the unspoken pauses. Hung looked at her for a long moment, then gently took her hand. "I know what you're thinking." Hoai let out a soft breath and didn't deny it. "I'm happy for San. I just sometimes wonder when I'll truly be considered part of the family." Hung tightened his grip on her hand, his voice low but steady. "It will come. Not everyone can open their heart right away. I believe time will heal everything, and it will also show Mom how important you are to me." Hoai looked up at him and nodded softly. In her heart, her joy for Tusan remained intact, and beside it, a small hope was quietly taking root, that one day, that distance would be filled by patience and sincerity. Hoai planned to visit Tusan in a few days. She wanted to wait a little longer for her to settle down before coming over to congratulate her, bringing along some local produce and a few things she had prepared herself for the soon-to-be mother. Thinking of Tusan gently rubbing her belly with a warm smile, Hoai felt her own heart soften. Today, Hoai and Hung took the opportunity to head into the forest to clear a small patch of land to expand their crops. The sun was harsher than usual, its rays filtering through the forest canopy, casting mottled patches of light onto the damp, earthy ground. On most days, Hoai was always the most energetic one, hoeing and clearing swiftly, her shirt soaked with sweat while a smile still lingered on her lips. But today felt different. After working for only a short while, Hoai began to feel unusually heavy, her head spinning as if something were tightening around it. Her vision blurred for a moment, her breathing growing quicker. She paused, leaning on her hoe, but the sudden wave of dizziness made her stagger, forcing her to steady herself against the nearby tree. Hung, working not far away, heard the unusual sound and turned around. Seeing Hoai struggling to stay upright, he was startled and rushed over. "Ca, what's wrong?" Hoai closed her eyes for a few seconds, took a deep breath, then opened them again. She forced a small smile to reassure him. "I'm fine, it's probably just the heat. I'm a bit tired." Seeing her face paler than usual, Hung was still uneasy. He supported her by the shoulders and guided her to sit down in the shade of the tree roots. "Let's rest for a bit. Don't push yourself too hard." Hoai nodded and quickly wiped the sweat from her forehead. The fatigue still lingered quietly inside her, but she told herself it was only because of the heat and overwork. She had no idea that this moment of unsteadiness in the forest today had silently opened a new turning point for both of them, something they hadn't yet found the words to name. Near noon, Hoai asked Hung to head home first so she could cook. Even though she had rested for a while in the forest, the discomfort in her body still hadn't completely faded. Her head felt heavy, her throat oddly tight, as if something were stuck there. On the way back, Hoai slowed her steps, quietly reassuring herself that it was just the heat and the early morning work. Once home, she busied herself in the kitchen. The smell of hot oil rising from the pan made her pause. She frowned, lifted a hand to cover her mouth as a sudden wave of nausea surged up. Hoai quickly turned off the stove and leaned against the counter, standing there for quite some time before the feeling eased. In that moment, a very faint thought flashed through her mind, vague and fragile, yet enough to make her heart race. Could it be? She didn't dare finish the thought, nor did she dare believe it. When Hung returned home, the two of them sat down to eat. The meal was simple, as usual, but as soon as Hoai picked up her chopsticks, her throat felt uncomfortable again. After only a few bites, the nausea returned, stronger than before. She hurriedly set the chopsticks down, turned her face away, and took deep breaths to hold it back. Hung immediately sensed something was wrong. "Are you not feeling well? Should I cook something else?" Hoai shook her head, her voice soft and slow. "No. I just feel a bit unwell." But throughout the meal, she barely touched her food. The repeated waves of nausea left her exhausted and confused. Inside her, the suspicion from earlier in the day began to grow, becoming clearer bit by bit. The image of Tusan announcing her pregnancy suddenly appeared in her mind, followed by a feeling that was both nervous and hopeful, one she didn't dare name. Hoai placed a hand on her stomach out of habit, a very light, unconscious gesture. Her heart beat faster. What if? But what if it isn't? She stayed silent, not telling Hung, keeping those thoughts to herself. Inside Hoai, a very small sense of anticipation was quietly creeping in, mixed with worry and a vague fear, the fear of hoping, only to be disappointed. That afternoon, Hoai lay on her side on the bed, the late sunlight streaming through the window in long of light across the floor. She closed her eyes but couldn't sleep. The discomfort in her body lingered, unclear yet persistent, like a soft reminder that refused to let go. She reached for her phone and opened the calendar. Silently, she began counting the days. Her finger stopped at a familiar date. Then she counted a few more days beyond it. Her heart sank slightly, then beat harder. Hoai sat up, leaning against the headboard, her mind starting to piece together the seemingly small details, how easily tired she had been lately, how sleepy she felt earlier in the evenings, the tightness in her throat when she woke up, how familiar food smells had suddenly become unpleasant. All those sensations felt strangely familiar. She remembered something Tusan had once said a long time ago, her voice half joking, half serious. "Back then I wasn't even late yet. I just felt different." Thinking of that, Hoai gently placed her hand on her stomach. The touch was very light, as if she feared that pressing any harder might make the thought disappear. A feeling of nervous, fragile hope welled up inside her, mixed with worry. If it really is. Am I ready? She didn't dare think any further. She didn't tell Hung either. Whenever he asked after her, she only smiled softly and said she was a little tired from working too much these past few days. But when she turned away, her eyes would darken, carrying thoughts she couldn't yet name. That evening, while cleaning the kitchen, Hoai stood still for a long moment in front of a small cabinet where she kept miscellaneous items. Inside was something she had never imagined needing so soon. She opened it, looked at it, then closed it again, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it herself. Hoai took a deep breath. She told herself she needed a little more time. To be more certain. To not hope too soon, only to be disappointed. Yet deep in her heart, a very small sense of anticipation had already begun to glow, quiet and gentle, like a seed just touching the soil, unseen by anyone, yet silently taking root. The next morning, it was still not quite light outside. The house was so quiet that Hoai could clearly hear her own heartbeat. She woke up earlier than usual, gently turning so as not to wake Hung. Seeing him still sleeping soundly, she hesitated for a few seconds, then quietly got out of bed. She stood in the bathroom for a long time, holding the test strip, her palms damp with sweat. She had imagined this moment countless times in her mind, yet when she truly faced it, she felt strangely shaky. Hope and fear intertwined, anticipation mixed with anxiety, afraid that everything might just be her overthinking. Hoai took a deep breath. Then she followed each step slowly and carefully, as if rushing even a little might change the result. When she was done, she placed the test strip on the sink, turned her back, and didn't dare look right away. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Every second felt unusually long. Hoai placed a hand on her chest, feeling her heart pounding rapidly. Finally, she gathered all her courage and turned back. 2 clear lines appeared on the test. Hoai froze. For a few seconds, her mind went blank, then emotion suddenly rushed in, rising until her throat tightened. She lifted a hand to cover her mouth as tears spilled out without warning. Not out of fear, nor confusion, but from happiness so overwhelming she didn't know what to do with it. "It's real," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I really am pregnant." Hoai sank down onto the floor, her back against the wall, still gripping the test strip tightly, as if letting go might make everything disappear. She placed her hand on her stomach and gently stroked it, an instinctive, tender gesture. In that moment, all the fatigue, doubt, and worry of the past days seemed to fade away. A warm, quiet, and complete joy filled her heart. She thought of Hung. She imagined his eyes when he heard the news. She thought of Tusan, who had just begun her own journey into motherhood, and somehow, Hoai felt herself filled with newfound courage. She smiled through her tears, happy, moved, and feeling as though life had softened more than ever before. Hoai knew that from this moment on, something had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but truly, a small life was beginning to exist, carrying new hope, new love, and a long path ahead filled with affection and care. She put the test strip away in a small drawer and washed her face for a long time to calm herself. When she stepped out of the room, the sky was already a little brighter. Hung was sitting at the table, getting ready for work. Seeing Hoai standing silently at the doorway, her expression different from usual, he stopped. "What's wrong?" Hung asked, concern in his voice. Hoai looked at him, lips pressed together as if holding back something very big. She stepped closer and gently took his hand. In that moment, her heart suddenly felt calmer, the nervousness fading, leaving only the joy she wanted to share. "Hung," she called softly. I think I'm pregnant." Hung froze. He looked at Hoai for a long time, as if he hadn't fully grasped the meaning of her words yet. Then his eyes lit up, mixed with shock and emotion. "You mean, really?" Hoai nodded, tears shimmering at the corners of her eyes, her smile trembling. "I tested it, 2 lines." In that moment, Hung said nothing more. He simply stepped forward and held Hoai tightly, his arms closing around her as if afraid that letting go would make this happiness vanish. Hoai leaned against his chest, clearly hearing his heart beating hard and fast, just like her own. "Thank you," Hung whispered, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for giving me a family." Hoai smiled softly through her tears. She knew that from this moment on, she was no longer just his lover, she had become a very deep part of his life. A few days later, when she was feeling better, Hoai and Hung went to visit Tusan. The moment Tusan opened the door and saw Hoai, she exclaimed happily. But after looking a little closer, her expression softened, as if she sensed something familiar. The 2 women sat next to each other on the sofa. As they talked, Hoai hesitated for a moment, then gently placed her hand on her stomach. Tusan followed the gesture, her heart suddenly racing. "Sister Ca," she asked softly. "Is it possible that you also?" Hoai smiled and nodded. Tusan froze for a second, then laughed with joy. She placed her hand on Hoai's belly, while Hoai gently rested her hand on Tusan's. 2 hands, 2 heartbeats, 2 tiny lives, sharing a single, tender moment. "You're not walking this path alone anymore," Tusan whispered. Hoai nodded, her eyes warm. "Neither are you." In that warm, peaceful home, the two women sat side by side, sharing a joy that was quiet yet profound, the joy of women about to become mothers, and of families slowly becoming more complete, little by little. In the sunlit living room, Hoai and Tusan sat side by side on the sofa. Both of them rested a hand on their bellies in the most natural way, as if it were the most familiar thing in the world. Without needing many words, just one look was enough for them to understand each other's feelings. Tusan spoke first, her voice both shy and happy. At first, I felt tired all the time too. I couldn't eat much and was always sleepy. Some days, just smelling cooked rice made me feel uncomfortable. Hoai chuckled softly, her eyes lighting up at the sense of shared understanding. Me too. A few days ago I still thought it was because of the heat. Who would have guessed? She left the sentence unfinished, but the smile on her lips said it all. They continued talking, sharing every small sensation, the sudden waves of nausea, the unexplained fatigue, and the joy of realizing that a tiny life was growing inside them. Tusan talked about the first time she placed her hand on her belly and whispered to her baby, while Hoai listened intently, a gentle sense of anticipation rising in her heart. I feel like everything is changing very slowly, Hoai said softly, but the happiness is so clear. It's like learning how to love all over again. Tusan nodded with a smile. I think so too. All of a sudden, I want to be more careful, to slow my life down a bit. On the other side of the room, Hung and Hai sat facing each other, their conversation just as lively. It began with a few questions about work, but soon, quite naturally, it shifted toward the future, in a way that felt simple and real. Hai laughed. Looks like from now on, we'll have to think things through more carefully. It's not just about ourselves anymore. Hung nodded, his gaze thoughtful yet full of determination. Yeah. We'll have to think about the kids later on. The house, the land, their education, just thinking about it already feels like a much bigger responsibility. They discussed expanding their farmland and making longer-term plans for their families. Nothing grand or dramatic, just simple, steady plans about how to ensure their children would grow up secure and cared for. From time to time, Hung and Hai glanced toward the sofa, where Hoai and Tusan were chatting softly and smiling. Their expressions softened at the same time, filled with pride and happiness. In that house, laughter and conversation intertwined, and small dreams quietly began to take shape. Nothing loud or showy, just a very real bond among people stepping together into a new chapter, one of love, responsibility, and hope. As the conversation settled, Hung and Hai poured more tea and sat closer together. No one said it out loud, but both understood that from this moment on, their way of thinking had changed. Hai spoke first. I'm thinking about renovating the room at the back of the house. For now, to make it more open and safer, and later, it can be the baby's room. Hung nodded thoughtfully. I was thinking the same. My place isn't very big, but if I rearrange things, clear out some stuff, and fix it up a bit, it should be fine. What children need most is a clean, quiet space. The two men didn't talk in abstract terms. They discussed details, the lighting in the room, windows at the right height, non-slippery floors, rounded corners. Hai mentioned planting a few more trees to improve the air, while Hung thought about making low wooden shelves so that when the child grew older, they could reach things on their own. At first, we'll probably keep the crib in the parents' room for convenience, Hai said. But a separate room should still be prepared. Hung smiled lightly. Yeah. Better to prepare early for peace of mind. Once you have a child, you can't afford to be careless. They fell silent for a few seconds, each lost in their own thoughts. Not worry, but a growing sense of responsibility, clear and undeniable. They were no longer thinking only for themselves, every plan now carried the words for the future. Hai glanced toward the sofa, where Hoai and Tusan were sitting together, and spoke softly but firmly. I guess we'll have to try a little harder. Not to become rich or anything, just steady enough so the kids won't grow up lacking. Hung nodded, his gaze steady. Yeah. As long as the kids grow up in a home with laughter, with someone waiting for them to come back, that's enough. In that moment, the future didn't appear loud or dazzling, but it was very clear. Rooms renovated with care, evenings when the whole family gathered together, and tiny footsteps someday running across the yard. And from that day on, plans to renovate the house and prepare rooms for the children were no longer distant ideas, but a very real part of everyday life for both families.
Hello mọi người, vậy là mình đang rất vui được gặp lại mọi người ở trong kênh của mình. Hiện tại thì kênh của mình đang kể về câu chuyện của người mẹ đơn thân Hoài Ca và người mẹ đơn thân Tiểu San. Và sau khi Hoài Ca và Hùng đến được với nhau thì hôm nay họ đã đón tin vui khi có em bé. Và khoảnh khắc mà Hoài Ca và Tiểu San cùng nói chuyện về em bé, cùng bàn đến tương lai, cùng chuẩn bị làm mẹ, khoảng khắc ấy thật hạnh phúc. Còn Hải và Hùng thì tâm sự với nhau về tương lai, liệu rằng hai gia đình nhỏ này sẽ đi về đâu và cuộc sống hạnh phúc của họ sẽ diễn ra như thế nào. Thì mời mọi người cùng đón xem vào những video tiếp theo nha. Cảm ơn mọi người đã ủng hộ kênh của mình và luôn dõi theo những câu chuyện mà mình chia sẻ. Hy vọng sẽ vẫn được đồng hành cùng mọi người và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở video tiếp theo nha.